Well, thank you, Lars, and thank you for putting this together. And it makes me feel much more confident to have Lars here troubleshooting the technology. But I just wanted to start by welcoming you. I guess a pandemic turns out to be a really good time to start an online course. So I'm glad that you all made the choice to be here with me, because I know you could be binge watching The Tiger King or something else today. But the whole reason why I started this course was because I knew that there was a real need for people to have some refresher information. Oftentimes there's just a lot of time that passes in between people going through their introductory course and actually getting the equipment. Not to mention the fact that when you go through the introductory course, it's just so information dense that you just can't possibly retain it all. There's just no way. The beauty of this course is we're not beholden to BCIA rules for certification. We don't have to worry about that. So what I'm going to try to help you do is see the forest and not get caught up in the details of the trees, right? Because what a lot of people do when they're first starting to learn neurofeedback, and I certainly did this too, you try to memorize all the details, but there's so many details you can't possibly memorize them all. The other thing that happens a lot, because I've been helping Ed Hamlin teach the introductory course since 2012, so I know the other thing that happens a lot is providers try to anticipate every single eventuality they might run into. Well, what do you do if this? Well, what if you do if that? You can't really do it that way. It works a lot better if you have a conceptual framework and you understand certain key principles, and then those key principles will help you hang all the details and really remember them. So I know it's really possible to get caught up in all the details and miss the big picture. But whenever you find yourself getting lost in the weeds, it is helpful to take a step back to remember what we're doing, and that's what this course is all about, to keep helping you remember the big picture. And what I want all of us to remember is the reason why we're even bothering to learn how to do this really complicated thing, and the reason why we even want to provide it for people, is we want this to be a tool for transformation. We are trying to help people make positive changes in their life. And I honestly think that neurofeedback so far has been the most helpful therapeutic tool that I have come across. And I've been studying and practicing psychology since 1989 is when I started my undergrad career, and then I started working with clients in my graduate school career starting in 1995. And since then, I've been constantly looking, not just for my clients, but for myself, for the things that are going to help me and my clients have the highest possible quality of life. To date, I still haven't found anything better than neurofeedback. No matter, I know there's lots of different neurofeedback models out there. There's lots of different approaches. You can look up all kinds of neurofeedback protocols. But what I want us to keep in mind, that no matter what type of neurofeedback you're doing, no matter what protocol you're using, there's a goal for why we're training. What we're trying to do is enhance people's awareness about what's going on with them, so that they can then regulate themselves better. And if they can do those things, then they have a greater ability to choose how they want to respond to things happening, rather than just reflexively reacting based on old conditioning. And this is what mindfulness meditation and other types of meditation, that's what it's all about, is having the ability to really be present, see things as clearly as you can, and then choose how you want to respond. By the way, this class is everything I have learned in the 16 years I've been doing neurofeedback kind of distilled to the most important points that I think people need to know when they're becoming neurofeedback providers. And I'm going to preface this section with the caveat, I am an English major, so I have an English major's understanding of neuroscience. I am comfortable with what I know, and I'm very clear about what I don't know. Okay, and there's a lot that I don't know. But if you want to be a therapist that uses neurofeedback to help people change, these are the basics about brain functioning that I think everyone should know. Probably everybody here already knows this part. A lot of our clients don't know this, though. Nobody's brain is photocopying reality exactly the way that it is. Everybody's brain is taking in information from inside and outside themselves and creating a world, creating a virtual reality through our perceptions. And what's really great about being human is that if we do not like our current virtual reality, we have the ability to shift it and to change it and to make it a better place to be. And that's what really separates us from the other critters that we know about. As far as we know, we are the only ones who can intentionally make the decision to transform ourselves kind of from the inside out, sometimes from the outside in. But anyway, our dogs and our cats and other animals that we share this planet with, they can be transformed by external forces. But as far as we know, we're the only ones that can make that decision on our own and do it ourselves. And that's pretty miraculous. And honestly, it gives me chills every time I think about it or every time I talk about it. And neurofeedback is going to help you channel that ability for your clients. Okay. So fleshing this idea out, so all information coming from inside and outside your brain, your body actually, goes to the back of your brain where it's organized into a perception. And then as long as things are calm enough, the information will get sent to the middle of your brain where your brain adds everything it already knows about similar incoming information. Right? And again, if things are calm enough, then that enhanced perception gets sent to your central executive network in the front of your head. And then your central executive network decides what, if anything, you care to do about this information. And whatever you decide to do behaviorally becomes part of the next input cycle. So the back of the head is the input area, the middle of the head is processing, the front of the head is output. You can have some interruptions in this flow of information, but when things are really calm and working well, that's how it's designed to go. So we're going to talk more about what that means in terms of the EEG. But what I want you to know right now is that alpha, you should have higher amounts of alpha amplitude in the back of your head relative to the middle or the front. Because that would mean that alpha is sensory gating information. So when you have the appropriate amount of alpha, not too much, not too little, that's like sensory information is coming in at a manageable pace and your nervous system feels calm enough to keep sending that information upwards and forwards the way that it was designed to. But lucky for us, our brains aren't as concerned with accuracy. They're more concerned with survival, with good reason, because that was just a really smart thing for evolution to pre-program into us. And it's super adaptive if we happen to find ourselves in a dangerous or a life-threatening situation, right? Because I want to show you what happens if your nervous system picks up anything that it feels could be a threat, then it will not even involve the higher functioning parts of your brain, because the thing about the central executive network is it's slow. Those executives take time to come up with their responses and their decisions. And if you're in a truly life-threatening situation, you don't have time for that. Your brain just needs to quickly do something to help you run away, hide, freeze, and play dead till the danger is gone. So, and that happens really, really quickly. So the back of your head is designed to hijack you. If your nervous system picks up something that it thinks could be dangerous, it's designed to just mobilize you for fight, flight, or freeze. And that means the executives don't even get consulted in those situations, right? So a lot of our clients, if you're like me, probably most of your clients who had early developmental trauma, with good reason, their nervous system is primed to expect danger. And so they're going to see danger even when it may not really be there. Because in terms of survival, it is way more important to notice a threat or take a threat seriously than to underestimate a threat. Right? And that's the thing about our brains and our minds. We do not have to train our minds to register negative information. That just automatically happens. But we often have to train our minds to notice positive information. Okay, but we're going to come back to this concept when we start talking about the special protocols that we use for people with developmental trauma. Our main goal for those people is often to calm the back of the head down first, because that's where all the incoming information goes to begin with. So if that area is having problems, then probably everything downstream from that area is going to have some problems too. But if you can calm down the back of the head well enough, then information will just flow forward the way that it was designed to. Right? And so that's cool. Now, for some people, calming down the back will just be one step, and then you got to add in other things. For some people, calming down the back of the head is all you need to do, and then it frees the brain up to work the way that it is designed to when things feel safe. Okay? So the main point of this is just to know that input is in the back of the head, processing is in the middle, output is in the front. When things are calm enough, that's how the information flows. When things get too nerve-wracking or anything looks dangerous, those higher functioning parts of your brain are turned off. I always like to have more than one view of things. So here's just another example of that point, that when emotion is low enough, then information can flow up and forward the way that it was designed to. But if your emotion gets too high, either from anger, fear, excitement, love, hate, disgust, or frustration, and I love how they include love in there, because this helps explain why everybody, when they're first falling in love, kind of acts like adults. They're Twitter-pated, because when your emotion is strong, it disables your higher thinking cortex there. Okay. The other really important point I want us to remember, this will help you keep your starting reward frequency straight. If you can just remember this piece of information. Okay, so the right hemisphere in humans, the right hemisphere develops first, and it really evolved to help us avoid danger. Okay, the left hemisphere takes longer to develop, and its evolutionary specialty is more to approach opportunities. When things are working well, the right and the left hemispheres check and balance one another. But if the right gets overly activated relative to the left, then you're likely to see danger everywhere that you need to avoid. On the flip side, if the left hemisphere gets overactivated relative to the right, you might actually feel a little too confident, maybe a little grandiose, maybe a little manic, or you might feel like you could take on some really outrageous risks, like jumping off a building so that you can fly. So we need both the left and the right hemispheres to check and balance each other. But a sense of well-being comes along when the left hemisphere is slightly more activated than the right. So if someone is awake and alert and doing a task, and neurofeedback is a task, we need both the left and the right hemispheres to be online and available, but we want the left hemisphere to be slightly more activated than the right. That means you are willing to take appropriate risks. Also, I'm not really sure how much experience everybody here has with neurofeedback, but if you've read or heard about alpha asymmetry going along with depression, that usually refers to the left side of the brain, the left front part of your brain being underactive relative to the right. So when there are higher amounts of alpha amplitudes in the front left part of your brain, that can set you up to feel depressed or have emotion regulation problems or just have central executive network problems, right? So trying to give you a context for these details. But when we're first starting out with neurofeedback, we at least with our introductory course, we focus on 4 main protocols. We have C4 minus A2 and CZ minus A2. A2 refers to the right earlobe. And hopefully everyone knows that C4 is the right sensory motor strip. CZ is the center of the midline. It's also known as the vertex of the brain. But anyway, those are our protocols that target the right side of the body. So when we're trying to calm things down, and someone's awake and alert and they're doing a task, we want to reward them to be in the lowest beta range possible, which for most adults is going to be somewhere around 12 to 15 hertz. So that's why we use that 12 to 15 hertz reward on the right side. But if we happen to train somebody on the left at either CZ minus A2 CZ minus A1 or C3 minus A1, A1 being the left earlobe, then we use a mid beta reward of 15 to 18 hertz. And if you can kind of see the connection there, it helps you remember. So if I'm calming things down, I'm going to be by large usually working on the right side of the person's brain. If I'm wanting to activate them, I'm going to be working on the left side of the brain. So if I'm calming things down, I'm going to use a slower beta reward. If I'm trying to activate, I'm going to use a faster beta reward. And I hope that makes sense. Okay. Going back to this here for a minute too, you may have remembered this little analogy from the introductory course if you came through our introductory course. But we talk about how if you walk into your house after you've been outside appropriately socially distancing and you come back in, your right hemisphere would give you an alarm signal and you would feel like something is wrong before the left side of your brain kind of kicked in and realized, oh, someone stole my TV. So that the right hemisphere is really fast and it's more nonverbal. And the left hemisphere takes a little bit more time, and it's definitely the verbal parts of your brain are housed on the left side, right? So just as an example, with my beloved cat, Huey P, one time for the first time ever, I hung up a Christmas wreath on my front door, and he was coming in, and all of a sudden he caught sight of that wreath, and he just froze and just looked up. And he had to really take time to evaluate this new thing that he wasn't used to see, is this friend or foe? Is this friend or foe? So there's evolution is smart, and it has done these things to our benefit. but we want to use this knowledge to help people calm themselves down if they need to, or activate themselves if they need to. And I just want to pause it because I know that I've said a lot of information right now. And if you have any questions about anything I've said, and Lars, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll just repeat the question and then answer it so that it would be recorded appropriately. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments about what we've just talked about? No? Okay. So, and don't worry, I mean, right now I'm just trying to lay the framework and give you a context for the little details. But if you're panicking and you're saying, I don't remember what 12 to 15 is, I don't remember what 15 to 18 is, we are going to talk about that. Okay. But here's the other slide that I think is incredibly important. Whether or not you ever plan to put a sensor on someone's head, just if you're a therapist or you are a behavioral expert, behavioral change expert, you need to know about these three networks. Let's start with the default mode network. First of all, let me just orient you to this slide. These are fMRI images of the same brain. So the nose would be up top at the top of your screen, and then the back of the head is down there at the bottom. So when the color is red, that means that area is activated. When the color is blue, that means that area is not activated. Okay, so let's just break down these really three important networks. The default mode network, a really important hub that you can see in yellow there on the slide, is right at PZ. It's a really important hub there. And your default mode network, you've probably heard it mentioned a lot. This is getting a lot of press currently. But it is what helps maintain your autobiographical sense of yourself. It's who you really feel yourself to be based on your past experiences. And in and of itself, the default mode network is not bad or wrong. It's actually really wonderful. It helps us remember who we are, so we don't have to walk around rehearsing. Well, my name is Mary Ammerman. I'm 49 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. That's just all stored in there for you. And I don't know if any of you have ever had a similar experience. If you're going through something really painful, like a breakup, or you just lost someone you really loved, and when you first wake up in the morning, sometimes you can feel 100% fine, even like happy, and then all of a sudden it's like your default mode network kicks in and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going through a breakup, or I just had someone I really love pass away, right? It takes a little while for it to reconfigure itself when you wake up. But anyway, the default mode network, very handy, keeps your autobiographical sense of yourself. And the thing is, our brain likes to keep us in the default mode network whenever possible, because it's online whenever you're not purposely paying attention to a task. And purposely paying attention or being really present takes a lot of energy metabolically. Everybody's brain is really interested in conserving as much energy as possible so that it can evaluate new incoming information to see, is that friend or foe? Is this something I need to approach or avoid, right? So all of us spend about 30% of our time in our default mode network. But if you happen to have early developmental trauma, you can spend anywhere from 70 to 80% of your time in your default mode network. And what that means is people are then kind of stuck filtering current information through past painful experiences. Because I hope you can see it, but when you look at the default mode network and you look at the central executive network, they have several overlapping structures there, but they both can't be engaged at the same time. You're either in one or the other, right? And actually, the salience network is what determines whether you're going to be in your default mode or whether you're going to be in your central executive network. And so just to kind of go back to the default mode network, again, in and of itself, not a bad thing, very, very useful. And your default mode network can have a whole bunch of positive memories stored in there. But since the human mind is like Teflon for the negative, Teflon for the positive and Velcro for the negative, we often have a lot of unhelpful or negative messages stored in our default mode network. And when you are stuck kind of doing the same old behavioral responses you've always done and getting the same results you've always gotten, chances are really good you're operating from your default mode network. So the central executive network is more like your inner GPS. It can assess where you are and see where you'd like to be. And just like the GPS in our car or on our phones, it doesn't get upset if one of your behavioral strategies doesn't work. It's just like, oh, that didn't work. Recalculating, rerouting. So if you're like, here I am, and this is where I'd like to be, I'm going to see if this will take me there. If it doesn't work and you're in your central executive network, you're just like, oh, well, I'll try something else. But if you try a behavioral strategy, it doesn't work, and then you have all kinds of thoughts like, woe is me, I'm such a loser, my life never works out, it's always bad, then you can bet that you're kind of filtering that experience through your default mode network. Right? Makes sense? So the other thing to bear in mind from the introductory course especially is that PZ and your default mode network, that's in the back of or a big hub of the default mode network, is located in the back of your head. The back of your head is also where your involuntary attention network is, the one that's more reflexively survival oriented. Your voluntary attention network is located in the front of your head. And if you can see on that slide, FZ is kind of an important part of the central executive network. There. Okay, so voluntary attention is in the front of your head. Reflexive survival attention network, a big hub, is in the back of your head. So again, that helps. I'm going to go back to a former slide there. That helps us understand why most people that have early developmental trauma also have attention problems, right? Because at the back of your head, if your survival attention network is constantly hijacking you because your nervous system is picking up signs of danger, then your frontal lobe, your central executive network, and that voluntary attention network really doesn't have a chance to do its thing, right? Okay. So what determines which network is in charge? Well, it's the salience network, and that salience network has all kinds of connections to your viscera, your gut, your intestines, your heart, your lungs. So something has to be important enough to you in some way for you to spend the energy to turn your central executive network on. And this is why it's really important in therapy and in neurofeedback training to help identify your client's motivation, right? So why are they bothering to come to see you? What is wrong, and what do they want to see change, and what are they willing to do to get there? Because I promise you, the more you can kind of understand how what we're doing with the EEG connects to what your clients want to change in their everyday life, and the better you can explain that to your clients in terms that they can understand, the better results that you get with your training. I don't know if you've seen this study, but there was a study that showed neurofeedback providers, they looked at new neurofeedback providers with less than 5 years experience and more senior neurofeedback providers that had 5+ years of experience. And even when they were doing the exact same protocols, the more experienced neurofeedback providers tended to get better results. Well, there's a reason why. Because when you practice with confidence, that confidence gets conveyed to your clients. Also, if you really understand what you're seeing, you can explain it better in a way that makes sense to your clients so they know why they're doing what they're doing, right? And when you can really ground it in with something that is so important to them and, connecting why they're doing this training with what they want to change, then you get a better buy-in from them and you get better results. But just to reassure you again, like even if you really don't understand what you're doing right now, that is, by the way, that's 100% normal. When you're first starting out with neurofeedback, it is normal to feel overwhelmed and insecure. And most of us think if I only knew what I was doing a little bit better, then I could, make this person's life be amazing. If I just put the sensor in the right place and use the right reward frequency. And if it's not happening, we think it's our fault, That's all normal. But I will let you know, even if you don't really understand all the details yet, if you will just follow our step-by-step instructions for running neurofeedback sessions, you can still get really good results. You can get, even sometimes, especially if you're working with really young kids, you can get kind of amazing results, even when you don't totally understand what you're seeing. But with repetition, and if you are curious about what you're seeing and you're observant about what you're seeing, and you just keep repeatedly practicing neurofeedback, then the dots eventually all connect. And it really does take just repetition. But that's why we at our clinic spend a lot of time trying to identify the client's goals for what they want to change. And we also get them to start focusing on how would they know that something has changed. Because one of the things that we're ultimately trying to do is use the central executive network to reprogram the default mode network. So if your default mode network, if your story of yourself has a lot of negative, unhelpful messages, you can use the power of your central executive network to reprogram that. However, the only real way to reprogram your default mode network is to give yourself a different experience. And that's why experiential learning is so important. And what's really cool is that neurofeedback is experiential learning. But just to kind of flesh this out with a little example from my own life, I used to be totally terrified of public speaking, to the point where I wouldn't sleep at all the night before a talk. And when I would go up to talk, I would turn totally red, my face would blush, my voice would shake, I would stumble over my words, even my leg and butt muscles literally would quiver because they were so ready to run out of there, right? But there were, and I couldn't even talk in staff meetings, in graduate school classes. I wouldn't raise my hand. I would talk to my classmates after the class, and they said, "Why didn't you say that during the class?" I was like, "Are you crazy?" Because I really operated under the assumption better to be thought a fool than to say something and remove any doubt. Remember that, Clay? So I just had a whole bunch of fear, but my salience network knew that in my gut, there were just a lot of things I wanted to do professionally that would require me getting more comfortable talking in front of people. So I was really highly motivated to change this, right? So I did everything I could think of. I went to Toastmasters. I took an improv class. I let Ed talk me into doing all kinds of presentations with him. But what would end up happening, even though I would practice and I had done all this stuff, I would get up there and I would rush through my talk so fast, because even though my conscious mind was saying, I want to do this, my subconscious mind was saying, this is dangerous. You're about to get killed. You need to get out of here, right? So I finally realized I kept practicing what I didn't want to happen. So like the night before the talk, I would sit there and have all these horrible thoughts of, I'm going to get up there, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to forget what I'm saying. They're going to think I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. I'm going to look like an idiot. So these are all the things that are going through my head, which are not particularly helpful and don't do much for your anxiety, right? And even though I was saying, I want to do this, the default mode was saying, you don't want to do this. So I said, all right, I've got to really flip the script. And instead of going around practicing, I am someone who is terrified of public speaking, I've got to start practicing, I am someone who enjoys public speaking. So what I did was I recorded a description on my phone of myself really enjoying public speaking, like feeling calm, feeling confident, easily remembering my points, noticing people enjoying hearing my message, and even imagining, making a joke and having people laugh. And this was like a week before I was scheduled to give another talk. So I listened to it every night before I went to sleep. And it was just a brief description. So then I did the next talk, and I actually had a chance to make a joke, and it made people laugh. And I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of standing in front of a group of people and making them laugh. It's one of the best feelings in the world, right? So I actually had fun. I had fun during that class. So now my default mode network said, I'm someone who has always been afraid of public speaking until that one time where it was fun. Right? There's that one time it was fun. And I was able to build on that experience. So now my autobiographical story has at least this one experience of when talking in front of people was fun. And it didn't even feel dangerous. It was fun. So to this day, now I actually even look forward to it. I look forward to talking. And when I'm doing a class with Ed, sometimes I'm sitting there thinking, I can't wait for him to stop talking so I can start talking, because I have things to say, right? So that's just an example, though, of how we can use our central executive network and our salience network to reprogram the unhelpful messages of the default mode network. But I do want to point out, it does require having a different experience. So when people are doing neurofeedback training, we are trying to get them out of their default mode network, at least while they're training, right? At least while they're training. We don't want them sitting there practicing the same old unhelpful thoughts they always have while they're training, right? And the thing about neurofeedback is the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. So doing neurofeedback training is like holding up a mirror for your brain and your mind, because people are going to run into the same kinds of problems and issues that get in the way of them being present while they train in your office as they do out there in their everyday life, right? And just to kind of define those terms, when I say brain, I'm talking about what is actually physically happening in your brain, like on a cellular level. And then mind is what you're consciously aware of. And those two things greatly impact each other. And neurofeedback training actually provides an opportunity to work on both the level of the brain and the level of the mind. So anyway, this slide, again, it's just all about the importance of enlisting the person's salience network so that they are encouraged to really pay attention while they're training. And part of what will help them do that, again, is when you can connect why they're even doing this and the changes they're hoping to make in their brain waves with the behavioral changes they want to see happen in their everyday life. So again, I just want to pause and see if anybody has any comments, questions about any of this so far. No? Okay. So it might be painfully obvious by now. We see things the way that we see them, not because that's the way that they are, but because that's the way that we're seeing them. And I think Lisa might be here, and she actually tracked down the true speaker of this quote. I actually just credit it to my fellow graduate student, Andy Rosenbaum, because she's the one that told it to me. But we see things the way that we see them, not because that's the way that they are, but because that's the way we're seeing them. So we are all, running around, unless we're in our central executive network, we're running around, filtering our present experience through our past, right? So that is like wearing colored sunglasses or tinted lenses. So if you did not know you had on tinted lenses, and you know how some sunglasses make everything seem blue or everything seem yellow. Well, if you don't know you have those lenses on, you think that's just how the world looks. But when you realize, oh, I'm perceiving things through these tinted sunglasses, then you can actually experiment with taking those lenses off and seeing things differently, right? And again, this is where neurofeedback and mindfulness meditation are really cooperative, because the same is true with mindfulness meditation practices. We're just trying to get more present so that we can see things more clearly. And if you're present, you're not stuck in your default mode, right? If you're present, you're open to new incoming information and better able to evaluate that, and then better able to respond adaptively. Because again, if your alarm bells are constantly going off, that is in your nervous system. That's very adaptive if you're still living in a threatening environment. But if the situation has changed, and hopefully for a lot of our clients, probably not all, but hopefully for a lot of them, their situation has changed, but their nervous system is still responding as if they're in a crisis situation, a life-threatening situation. And then their responses may not be as adaptive. And that may be why they get into, altercations with significant others or with authority figures, or, get fired from jobs, or are afraid to even go to their job. So again, the beauty of being a human is that we can change all those things. Okay. So this slide, some of you've probably already seen before, but this is basically the culmination of my entire career. Because like we've said, your brain is creating this virtual reality for you. And these are the building blocks that I've figured out through reading, study, practice, my own therapy, my own neurofeedback training, and putting it all together. These are the skills you need to be able to create a positive inner world. And hopefully everyone can see there at the bottom of that pyramid is arousal regulation. And arousal, really another word for that is activation. If you can regulate the activation of your nervous system well, that makes all other life tasks easier. If you can't regulate your arousal well, it makes everything else harder. Right? Because if your nervous system arousal or activation is in an appropriate range, then you can pay attention well. And when you can put your focus where you want it to go, that is a huge leg up for any endeavor. Right? So if your arousal is way too high, you cannot settle down enough to focus. if your arousal level is way too low, you won't be awake or alert enough to focus. And I can pretty much guarantee you that anytime your loved ones are getting on your nerves, it's usually because your nervous system arousal is either too high or too low. And that's when all of us will kind of revert back to old conditioning and then just reflexively respond, right? But when our arousal regulation is in a good range, an appropriate range, then we can, again, so then the back of our head is not hijacking us and we're not stuck in our default mode network. Then our central executive network is online and can really help us out. So then that makes it a lot easier to even hear what your therapist is telling you, much less remember it and apply it in situations outside of therapy. This is why I think mental health has kind of been barking up the wrong tree for a long time, because I think we've been trying to get people to skillfully relate to their thoughts and their feelings before they could regulate their arousal or put their attention where they want it to go, right? The good news, again, is that neurofeedback incorporates both those two basic elements of this pyramid, because it's going to be working on arousal regulation and it's also working on training people's attention. Because again, if you can choose which aspect of your experience you're focusing on, it really changes your experience. So the analogy I always use with my clients is, let's pretend we're in an old abandoned building and we have a flashlight, and our flashlight here is like our voluntary attention network. So if we shine our flashlight in this abandoned building and we shine it to the left and we just see this toy chest full of broken toys, well, that might be a little sad or depressing or whatever. But if we only look right there and we never shift our flashlight over to the right, we might miss this treasure chest full of jewels. Now, just because we shift our flashlight over to the treasure chest full of jewels, it does not make the broken toys disappear. But it definitely changes the way we feel about this abandoned house, right? So the quality of your life really is determined by the focus of your attention. And since our minds are kind of geared to really amplify the negative things, because again, it's more important to survival to notice the negative than the positive, we really don't have to train our minds to notice that negative stuff, but we often have to remember to notice the positive. Okay. So then I think the other really important element for creating a positive inner world is being able to show compassion to yourself. And I don't want to stop with just ourselves. I want us to be able to obviously show compassion to other people as well. But this is an instance where charity really starts at home, because the more compassionate you can be with yourself, the more compassionate you can be. Doesn't guarantee that you will be, but it makes it more possible to be compassionate with other people, because we really can't accept or tolerate things in other people very well that we can't accept or tolerate in ourselves. We might be able to do it temporarily, but it usually doesn't last, right? But when we can accept and tolerate things in ourselves, we can accept and tolerate those same things in other people, right? So there we go. So again, I just wanted to open it up for any questions or comments. This is pretty much the end of the slides I had prepared for tonight. I am happy to revisit any of the slides, or repeat anything, or if it just triggered a question or a comment, that's fine as well. And like I said, make no mistake, we're going to get into the bark of the trees right now, but I'm kind of trying to paint a picture of the forest of what we're trying to do with our clients, and how and the rest of the class will be helping connect how this tool of neurofeedback can address all these things we've just talked about, that's why I think it's so amazing and why I'm happy to be here talking to you about it.
Maria, I have a question.
Sure.
It's Gina. I remember we learned that after you do a neurofeedback session, you'll ask clients about their mood, energy, clarity, and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also ask questions like how did they, operate in a stressful situation, or kind of see where some of those, how they were able to regulate their emotions in real life situations? Do you ever questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mood, sleep, energy, and clarity or focus, I mean, those are the main categories that neurofeedback has really demonstrated to be effective with. So we always want to ask about those, but absolutely, the more information you can get about their responses, the better. And oftentimes for adults especially, sometimes the changes that come from neurofeedback training can be subtle. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes when an adult is trained with neurofeedback, they might not notice the change until after people outside of them notice it, right? Sometimes the people notice it before the other people do, but lots of times other people notice the change before the person themselves does. And that is one of a very common comment that people make, is that after they've trained, things that would normally kind of rattle them or really discombobulate them just kind of rolled right off. And that's what's really great too, because unlike some other behavioral strategies where you have to count to 10 before you blow your top and all that stuff, this is hopefully helping reset the person's baseline, so they're not as likely. If your arousal is really high to begin with or really low to begin with, it doesn't take much to tip you into an even worse state. But if your arousal level is in an appropriate range and you're relatively calm, but alert enough and awake enough to do what you want to do, then it would take a whole lot more stressors to flip you up into a panic state or an angry state or what have you. So yes, I mean, I think all of that stuff is good. And if someone is not noticing any changes, those are things that you can question, you can ask about to see if there's some evidence there that they're just not recognizing yet. For sure.
So Mary, there's a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
One is balancing right and left hemisphere the best way to start reducing arousal to start learning new ways to relate?
Well, that one may or may not be true. So I assume, are you talking about a C3 minus C4 protocol then, like doing the stabilizing protocol? Is that what we were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the thing about stability training, if your person has an issue with instabilities in their EEG and you're not addressing the instability with your training, then it's hard to get lasting good results. But let's say instability is not a particular issue for your person and you stick with C3 minus C4 training, then you're not likely to trigger anything unwanted. But on the downside, people may not notice any changes either. Because if you're training them for something that isn't really their issue, then you're probably not going to hurt them, but it might not be giving them the best bang for their buck. Now, having said that, there are some practitioners that train everybody they know at C3 minus C4, everybody they see at C3 minus C4, and still get good results. But by the end of this course, hopefully you're going to have a whole lot more context for how to pick a starting protocol, because while there is no perfect protocol, we want to try to put the person's history, symptoms, and EEG information together to pick the protocol that would be the most likely to give them benefit without triggering anything unwanted, so they'll stick around long enough to train and really get the learning. Yeah, and so that is definitely what we are going to spend a lot more time talking about. So, and we're gonna look at all the clues in terms of history, symptom, and what the EEG recordings of a mini map can show us about why we might pick one protocol over another for a person.
Thank
Okay.
you.
What other question do we have?
There's one other one. It says, could you repeat the left side, right side goals for stimulation or calming?
Oh yeah. So if you are trying to calm someone's arousal down, you target the right side of the brain, because that right hemisphere really evolved to avoid danger. And if it's overactivated, then you can have like an angry depression or an anxious depression. And be afraid to, we all have clients, I'm sure, that are kind of afraid to leave their house, and they're very, very avoidant. The thing about avoidance behaviors, the best they do is bring temporary relief. And then when that temporary relief is over, you're still stuck with the same problems, right? So if you want to engage the pleasure reward circuits of your brain, you really have to approach things and engage with life, right? And so in order to do that, we often have to calm the right side down. But some people actually need to activate their left side. The left side evolved to approach opportunity. Right side evolved to avoid danger. Left side evolved to approach opportunity. And a sense of well-being comes when the left side is slightly more activated than the right, because then you're willing to take reasonable risks and appropriate risks and go out there and live an interesting life, right? And so when we're calming and we're targeting the right side, we'll use a slower beta reward. So if 12 to 15 hertz is low beta, 15 to 18 hertz is mid beta or regular beta. So when we're trying to calm someone's nervous system down, we will target the right side, and they're still awake and alert though. And when someone's awake and alert and doing a task, we want them to be in a beta state. We just want them to be in the calmest beta state possible. So for most adults, that's going to be around 12 to 15 hertz. We're calming on the right. When we're activating on the left, we would use more of a mid beta reward, 15 to 18. And by the way, I'm talking about people who do not have disordered arousal or unstable arousal, because we have special protocols that we will be talking about that we use for our disordered arousal people and our unstable arousal people, because we don't want to accidentally destabilize them with their training. But if you get lucky and you don't have to worry about either disordered or unstable arousal, you might spend time just calming down the right or activating the left. And honestly, there are a lot of people that need a little bit of both. They need a little right side calming, and they need a little left side activating. And we're going to talk about how you combine all of those things and how you decide what protocol to use with what person. Again, tonight I just wanted to give you a little bit of context that you can use to embed these details. Any other questions? I know
there is one more, and okay. I wonder, it sounds like it might be appropriate in one of the future discussions, because it's about stabilization training, and if there are no symptoms of instability. And so it seems like that would fit with when you start talking about that stabilization protocols. And the person is asking about head injury.
Yeah, head injury. So I can do that really briefly if people want to stick around. I know some people might have to go, but yeah. So with head injuries get a little bit complicated. if someone has had a very significant head injury, meaning they were unconscious for a while and or they had lingering effects in terms of their memory, their emotion regulation, their attention, sensitivity to light, all that sound, all that stuff, then chances are you're going to want to start with stabilization. That would be the safest thing to do. But if someone is, middle aged and they had a head injury, when they were in elementary school on the playground, and they didn't remember having any lingering effects, and they've never hit their head again since then, you might not have to worry about that. You might not. But you're going to file that information away, because if you decide, okay, it doesn't seem like it was anything too significant, so I'm going to just focus on calming this person down. But if you focus on calming the person down and it becomes really hard to get lasting good effects, or you get mixed results from the same protocol, that's when you would switch to stabilization. The other thing is, if you have an athlete or any person that has had multiple concussions, even if they weren't that serious, on their own, multiple concussions add up and can be similar to like a major head injury. So I remember we had a gentleman in our class. He was probably in his late 60s, and he said he didn't have any of the big 4 start unstable items. So he chose the calming protocol, and he got really strange results. So I went and pulled him aside, and I talked to him, and I'm like, so what about these? Let's talk about head injuries. And he was like, oh yeah, I played football in high school, and I had 9 concussions in high school. And I'm like, we're switching to the stability protocol. And after we switched to the stability protocol, he did great, So that's just it. Like, sometimes you don't know, but it does tend to become obvious. If instability is an issue, it will become obvious. And oftentimes, if you're at all worried about it, at the very least, you could end your training with some stability training, because that is unlikely to trigger anything negative, and it can often help avoid an unwanted response. So that's also a possibility. Did another question come in? I promise we're going to get into all these things going forward.
That's all the ones that are in the chat.
Okay.